Well, Daf Peichet Amud Aleph. Being religious isn't what you think. Beyore Shamayim Askinan. Just before I go ahead, I just want to mention next week, once again, I've got to be overseas on a consulting project. So, Rav Ghibli, thanks for Rav Ghibli. You see, I can travel freely since you're involved. It's easier. We'll handle the shir every morning, but it won't be uploaded for the next week. So the word frum, what does it mean? The word frum was adopted from German. It's a German word, from, and it was adopted a long time ago in the Middle Ages. But it means pious in German. What's interesting is that of all the nations, we've learned through experience that German piety is skin deep. So I would translate frum, since it's a German word. You must translate it into what it really is. Frum means skin deep piety. That's what the word frum means, and it has nothing to do with anything in Torah. It's not a Torah word. It doesn't appear in the Gemara anywhere. It doesn't appear in the Mishnah anywhere. I haven't even seen it in later writings, in the poskim and of later years. The word frum is a social word that people use to categorize themselves or one another. And if we look at it, essentially it means skin deep piety. That's what frum means. And if you understand it that way, you get less disappointed with people's behavior. You say, but he's a frum person, how can he do that? Yeah, the Germans were civilized people, and look what they did. I'm not making a direct comparison, but it doesn't mean anything. The Germans were courteous, they were civilized. Look what they did. You're disappointed in them? No, that's what it is. A frum person behaves like an uncouth person, or like an immoral person, or an unethical person. Nothing to be disappointed about. It's skin deep. That's what frum means. In Torah, we have other classifications of people. We have an Am Haaretz. An Am Haaretz is a person who hasn't learnt anything. That's kind of the most insulting thing you can say about somebody in the Torah world, that he's an Am Haaretz. Then you've got a Talmid Chacham, and we know what a Talmid Chacham is. Somebody who has been somebody who has studied and served under Talmidei Chachomim. So he knows how to learn, he knows how to think, and the Masorah, the tradition, has been passed down to him. That's a Talmid Chacham. Then you have a Chosid, and a Chosid, as we know, is somebody who knows everything. He knows the whole of Shulchan Aruch, and he keeps the whole of Shulchan Aruch. But he goes further than that, he goes beyond that. And that's why we say, Ein Am Haaretz Chasid. You can't be an Am Haaretz and a Chosid. You can't be ignorant and a pious person. Because a pious person, a Chosid, is somebody who, after keeping everything he has to keep, which means he knows everything he has to know, he goes beyond that to the next level. That's what a Chosid is. And then we have another category called a Yoreh Shamayim, a God-fearing person. What does Yoreh Shamayim mean? That we'll see in our shir today. Once again, this is a piece of learning that we have so often, where we've got people from not just across the generations, but across the millennia joining us on the Beis HaMedrash, going back not only to the Gemara from the 5th century or so, but we'll have the Shiltus of Rav Achai from the 7th century, 8th century, early 8th century. We'll have Rabbeinu Gershom from the 10th century. And we've got the people that we know well, the Rashbam, the Rambam, and so on, all the way till the 19th century. Starting off with a Perek of Tehillim, Perek Tetvav, the 15th chapter of Tehillim. Mizmor David, Hashem mi yagur be'ohelecha. Asks David HaMelech, King David asks, who is the person that is fit to live in your homes, in your palaces? Mi yishkon bahar kodshecha. Who has the right to dwell on your holy place, come to your Beis HaMikdash? Now, if you pause there and think to yourself, I wonder what he's going to answer. So you would imagine somebody who's Shomer Shabbos. Can't have somebody who's a Mechal Shabbos, can't be there. Somebody who doesn't just keep kosher, but only eats Mahadrin. But that's Hechsher. Otherwise you can't, how can you be on Har Hashem? Somebody whose tzniut is absolutely impeccable. Otherwise, how could they be on Har Hashem? Those things are all important, but that's not the critical factor of religiousness. That isn't what makes you somebody who is fit to be Yagur ba'olecha and Yishkon ba'ar kodshecha. What makes you fit? Holech tamim u'foel tzedek, a person who's straight and does tzedakah, does righteous deeds. V'dover emet bilvavo, and his word is so honest that even in his heart he is honest. Lo ragala l'shono, he's never talked lashon hora. Lo asal re'ehu ra'ah, he's never done anything bad to his friend. V'cherpa lo nasal krovo, he's never been an embarrassment to his relatives. Nivzeh be'einav nimas, the only people he despises are people who are despicable in Hashem's eyes. Ve'et yirei Hashem yechabed, but people who fear God, he honors. Nishba lahara v'lo yamir, kaspo lo natan b'neshech, he's never lent money with interest. V'shochad al naki lo lakach, and he's never taken a bribe. Osei eile lo yimot la'olam. Somebody who lives in this way will never disappear from the world. Then we've got a pasuk in Perich Kuf Aleph. Einai, my eyes, says Hashem, is b'ne'emanei eretz, is among the honest people of the land. Lashevet imadi, they sit with me. Holech b'derech tamim, those who go in a straight way. For hu yisharteni, they will serve me. All the qualifications are ben adam l'chaviro, all the qualifications that David HaMelech mentions, without one exception, are all in the area of interpersonal relationships and the dealings we have one with another. That's what defines a person's religiousness, according to David HaMelech. Now let's learn it in the Gemara. Tanu Rabbana, we have a brisa. Here's the case. A person buys vegetables in the market. He's going into the market. This whole sugi of Gemara is talking about what happens when you're standing in a store and you pick something up and you're going to buy something, but you're examining, you're looking at this one, you're looking at that one, and you're feeling it and you're touching it. At what point does it become yours? So you're in the market, you want to buy vegetables, and you're touching the different ones, you're feeling them, you're lifting them up. If you keep on doing that, you spend the whole day in the market. You're not koine, there's no kinyan, and therefore you are not obligated to take meiser from anything, to tithe anything, because it's not yours. Gamar belibo liknoto, if you only decide in your heart, yes, this is the one I'm going to buy. Kana, from that moment it's yours. V'nitchayev b'meiser, and you have to take meiser. Now what we're going to have to look at is, does this mean kana v'nitchayev, you've acquired it fully, and the deal is done, even though there doesn't seem to be a kinyan, and therefore you are chayev b'meiser, you have to give meiser, or does it mean kana v'nit chayev b'meiser, you have acquired it in as much as you have to give meiser, but it's not a commercial transaction. Then the Gemara goes on, so what do? Lachziro iyevshar shekvar nit chayev b'meiser, you can't give it back to him because you can't give something back that isn't meisered. And you can't take meiser shekvar mafchitim bedomim, because if you take meiser and then give it back, you're going to be giving back less than you took. That's not fair. Okay, it says masrov v'noten lo damei meiser. You take the meiser and you compensate him for the amount you've taken off for the meiser. You give him back the produce and you pay him cash for the meiser. Ask the Gemara, atu mishum de gamar bilivo liknot kana v'nit chayev b'meiser. Just his decision in his heart makes him a koine. How does that work? An ordinary person just saying, making up in your mind, that doesn't obligate you. But for a Yoreh Shemayim, if you are a Yoreh Shemayim, it obligates you. Could go on Rav Safra, Tikim benafshe v'dover emet bilvavo. Like Rav Safra, he was a real Yoreh Shemayim, because he lived by dover emet bilvavo. He lived by chapter 15 of Tehillim, and therefore for him it would obligate him. From Rabbeinu Gershom, it's clear that the obligation is a meiser obligation. You are ritually obligated. You're obligated to give meiser to the Kohen, to the Levi, everything that you have to do. But it's not a commercial transaction. As Rabbeinu Gershom says, even though you're not going to take the goods for yourself, but meiser you're obligated. You're obligated to for meiser. He doesn't say that you're obligated to give it back, that you may not give it back. And then he brings the story of Rav Safra. What does it mean, Rav Safra? It's a well-known story of Rav Safra. The Rabbeinu Gershom tells the story, and the Rashbam quotes it. Rav Safra shaya lo chamor limkor, v'shaya shaya korei kriyat shema ba'echad v'amar lo tenaihu li bekach v'kach damim. Rav Safra wanted to sell his donkey, and somebody came to him and offered him a certain amount of money, and in the middle of Kriya Shema, he couldn't help hearing the offer, and he agreed in his mind, yes, as soon as I'm finished Kriya Shema, I'll sell him the donkey. But he couldn't answer him. So the buyer, who thought he wasn't answering because he hadn't accepted the offer, upped to the offer and offered him more. When he finished Kriya Shema, he said, in my mind, when you made your first offer, I agreed to sell. I'm not going to take any more money than that from you. We'll be bound by the first one. That's the story. And the Rashbam seems to go in the same direction. If he wants to give it back, implying that that's possible. He can give it back. The only question is he has to do Maisa. And that's why the Gemara questions, how do you give it back? So you have to compensate him for the Maisa that you take because you're obligated to give him Maisa. But as Rabbi Gershom and the Rashbam learns, it doesn't seem to be that there's a commercial obligation. The difficulty with that is the story with Rav Safra. Rav Safra, there was a commercial obligation. That wasn't talking about Maisa, he was talking about selling a donkey. So why would the Gemara bring that in? Tosfos asks the question and says, even with a Yoresh Mayim, im tomar kishigamar belibo liknot hech machzir. If you've decided to buy, then why is the Gemara discussing how do you give it back? Who gives you the right to give it back? How can you even back out of the contract? You must say that the seller agrees. But if the seller doesn't agree, you can't back out of the contract. So clearly Tosfos is not learning like Rabbi Gershom. Tosfos is learning that this is not only an obligation to give Meiser, it is also an obligation to stand by the contract. Although nothing was said, nothing was signed, nothing was sealed. This is all in your heart. It obligates you to a full contract of obligation. According to the Kesef Mishnah, the Rambam paskins in the same way. So we have two views among the Rishonim as to whether when a Yoresh Shamayim says in his heart, this is a deal, I'm going to buy this, and then he wants to change his mind, we have two views. According to the Rabbi Gershom and the Rashbam, he can still change his mind. He hasn't said anything, but he has to give Meiser in the case of Meiser. According to Tosfos, and it would seem the Rambam, according to the Kesef Mishnah, that isn't the case, but even that internal private decision to sell or to buy is binding on a Yoresh Shamayim. A lot of this approach, the approach of Tosfos, is rooted in the Shiltus. The Shiltus of Rav Chai Gaon is the first post-Talmudic publication that we have. After the Gemara, the first sefer that we have, the earlier sefer after the closing of the Gemara, was the Shiltus of Rav Achai, who was one of the Goenim. He was the Rosh Yeshiva in Pumbedita in Babylon, and he wrote the Shiltus. He writes it on the parashas of the Chumash, and they're wonderful analyses of Halacha and Hashkafa. And here we see at the end of Parashas Vayechi, where the Shiltus says, Mechayvin Beit Yisrael leMishkal uleMitra behemnuta. A Jewish person is obligated to trade in good faith. If somebody agrees to sell, even though there's no kinyan yet, he may not withdraw. Even though it's only his speech, he didn't do a kinyan, so really the deal is not yet done. A person should not go back on his word. A person should stand by his word no matter what. He goes on and he brings the psukim that we've learned. If he's decided to buy, even though he hasn't said a word, not only hasn't he done a kinyan, he hasn't even said anything. That's what dover emet bilvavo means. I not only commit myself to every business deal I make, I commit myself to every word I say. Not only do I commit myself to every word I say, I commit myself to every thought I have. Then he says, he brings the story. This is the real origin of the story of Rav Safra. This is the earliest reference we have to the story of Rav Safra and the donkey. And he goes on and he finishes off. The Netziv wrote a very important perush on the Shiltus. So the Netziv spanned the whole of the 19th century. He was a Rosh Yeshiva of Volozhin. He was the son-in-law of Rebbitzele Volozhin, so she married the granddaughter of Reb Chaim Volozhin, who was the talmid of the Vilna Gaon. It's quite interesting. The Netziv, who is responsible for the whole development of the yeshiva world. All the great Rosh Yeshivas of the next generation came through Volozhin, came through the Netziv, and he's connected with everybody. The second marriage, he marries the daughter of the Aruch HaShulchan. Reb Chaim Soloveitchik marries his granddaughter. They're all intermarried. He's at the core of the whole world of Torah, and he lays the foundation for the whole world of Torah. And he was having a tough time learning when he was a young man. He felt he wasn't succeeding, and he was going to go into business. And a chance conversation with Rabbi David Luria apparently turned him the other way. People talk about everybody should go into the army. I don't want to get into the whole question of course everybody has to be making the proper contributions, but we've got to also look at the risks. Imagine the Netziv would have gone into business or would have gone into the army and then to university. We wouldn't have. You know what we wouldn't have had? The Torah we would not have had we not had the Netziv. That's why one has to be. It's not such a simple thing. We've got to find ways to be able to sort out who are the people who are in full-time learning, who are the people who learn and go into the army and go into the business and professional worlds, who are the people who are only in the army and the business, who they're not in learning at all other than learning a little bit every day. They're different people. We've got to be able to find places for everybody and make sure that everybody is making the best contribution they can to the building of Am Yisrael in the best ways that they can. So that's the Netziv, and the Netziv writes, Notice, says the Netziv, it doesn't use the word chasidus here, it uses Yoreh Shemayim. What's the difference? Shma mina dina hachi, that tells you this is the halacha, this is not going the extra mile. A chasidus, a chosid, is somebody who not only keeps the halacha but goes beyond it. A Yoreh Shemayim is not that. A Yoreh Shemayim is something else. Kedita b'Shabbos techiluk gadol b'davar. There's a big difference between a chosid and a Yoreh Shemayim. Vaynu kamo shekatavnu she'af agav she'en b'zeh mishum mechusrei amona. Even though this is not considered somebody who's acting out of faith, sharei lo samach da'atei dechavrei, because his friend wasn't relying on it. So he hasn't disappointed his friend. His friend doesn't know that he made it up. It's just between him and God. Mikol makom hachozer bo ein ruach hachamim nocher mene im lo shenishtaneh ha'inyan. If you go back on your thought, that's not allowed. The Chachamim aren't appreciative of that. Not like the Yerushalmi, who says that it's midas chasidus. Ela dina hachi. This is the halacha. That's the chidush of the Netziv, working it out from the Sheiltas in understanding our Gemara, is Yoreh Shemayim, is if you are a Yoreh Shemayim, this becomes the halacha for you. You don't have the option not to. An ordinary person can say, I didn't say anything, I didn't promise anything, I didn't do a kinyan. An ordinary person can do that. But a Yoreh Shemayim can't. For him, there's a different halacha. For a Yoreh Shemayim, for a God-fearing person, that is the halacha. The way the Tosfos understands it, the way the Rambam, according to the Kesef Mishnah, understands it. The Netziv has a different way of learning the Rambam, but the Kesef Mishnah learns the Rambam in alignment with the Tosfos, that you can't back out. If you're a Yoreh Shemayim, you can't back out, like Rav Safra. Rav Safra didn't think, I'm a big chosid, so although one can back out. No, says Rav Safra, I, as a Yoreh Shemayim, cannot back out on what I thought in my mind while I was saying Kriya Shema, and you made me an offer. Halachically, I can't back out because I'm a Yoreh Shemayim. Why is that? What is the link between being a Yoreh Shemayim and the way you do business? What does a Yoreh Shemayim mean? Yira is partially connected. Fear means fear of God, but it doesn't really mean fear of God. It means sight of God. Yira and ro'eh are connected words. One who sees Hashem in front of him all the time. That's a Yoreh Shemayim. And therefore there's fear of God. It's not fear, I'm in God's presence all the time. I see Him. Shaviti Hashem lenegdi tamid. Hashem, I place Hashem in front of me all the time. I see Him all the time. If that's the case, I made something up in my heart. Hashem lelevav yireh. Hashem looks into the heart. It's all very well that my counterpart in business doesn't know what I was thinking. But I'm a Yoreh Shemayim. If I'm a Yoreh Shemayim, Hashem knows what I've thought. Hashem knows I've made a decision in my mind. I can't back out now because Hashem is my counterpart, not just my business person. The fact that my counterpart in trade doesn't know what I've thought in my heart, but I have a different counterpart, a Yoreh Shamayim. The counterpart of a Yoreh Shamayim is Hashem in everything he does or she does. A woman can also be a Yoreh Shamayim, of course, and often are greater Yoreh Shamayim than men are. And to be a Yoreh Shamayim is to see Hashem in front of you all the time, and that is a different halacha. You've now got a different Shulchan Aruch. A Yoreh Shamayim has got a different Shulchan. An ordinary person, a Talmid Chacham, has got the regular Shulchan Aruch. A Chosid has the regular Shulchan Aruch, but chooses to go beyond that. A Yoreh Shamayim has a different Shulchan Aruch. He's now governed by what's in his heart, and that's why David HaMelech says, Mi yagur ba'olecha, mi yishkon bahar kodshecha. Somebody who sees you, Hashem, as his counterpart in all his dealings. And everything he does with other people is governed by the way you're seeing him, not by the way society is seeing him. That's frum, by the way society is seeing him. That's skin-deep piety. That's not what Yireh Shamayim is. Yireh Shamayim is I really make my decisions, including my business decisions, based on what you, Hashem, can see in my heart. Because I'm not only a Talmid Chacham or a Chosid, I'm a Yireh Shamayim, which is the highest level of all.